Hello and welcome to this episode of Meet the Farmers. We're recording today on the last day of 2016, which is a year that has unleashed new uncertainty or opportunity, or both for farming, depending on your perspective. However, today I want to discuss something that is very long term, and that's something that's quite close to my heart, which is soil health. And I am at Earl's Hall Farm near Clacton-on-Sea with David Lord, who is an arable farmer and contractor. So David, thank you for speaking to me today.
You're very welcome.
Can you start by describing the farm and your business?
Okay, so if I go back a few years, up until the late 90s, we were actually a mixed farm. So we had 80, 90 head of dairy cows and some beef followers. And we took the decision in the late 90s, dairy was getting really tight. We sold the dairy herd. We actually expanded our arable side to the point we're now sort of farming about 1,600 acres. We're a bit of a mixed group of soils. We've got some light land that we grow some potatoes and onions on, but the majority of our land is quite heavy. And we're finding as time went on, it was just getting increasingly hard to work the land and achieve what we wanted to do in a sustainable way. And when we looked at it, we're losing organic matter from our soils, which was the major problem, which was making them so hard to work. That highlighted to me that we needed to change our system, which kind of brings us up to the point we're at now.
When did you start thinking in terms of no-till?
You could call it a perfect storm, I suppose. Typical for an Essex farm on heavy land, we were getting quite a bad blackgrass problem. It's a weed that's been around for a long time, but as time has gone on, nature can get round most things that you tend to throw at it. The weed itself was becoming resistant to many of the chemicals we're trying to use to control it, to the point now that the only chemical we can really rely on, truly, is glyphosate. And obviously you can't put glyphosate on a crop that's growing, so you need to integrate that into your cropping system. The only way you can really do that is by having spring cropping, and the only way you can really have spring cropping on heavy land is to have something growing on the land in the autumn and through the winter to keep the land structured and growing, keep the soil biology going. So the whole thing, that the black grass and having spring cropping, that was sort of our main driver. And then along with that is that actually it's a lower cost, lower input way of farming. So we're using a lot less diesel, it's less labour, and actually our chemical use is going down because we're finding with a winter wheat crop, traditionally we're probably using 3 to 4 different herbicides on it, whereas our spring crops we're using 1.
We're in a situation whereby glyphosate's licence has been renewed for only 18 months. Would you be able to cope without it?
I cannot imagine farming without glyphosate. It is as simple as that. Organic farmers obviously do it, but that is an entirely different concept. Our system at the moment, by using glyphosate, we're able to use a drill which just lightly penetrates the surface of the soil and puts the seed into the soil without really disturbing it. So we're not losing carbon, the soil life is left intact, and the whole system works really well, but it all evolves around glyphosate. Whereas organic farming, you're back to the plough. Don't get me wrong, there's an awful lot to learn from organic farming, but I'm yet to be persuaded that organic farming is the answer.
What do you think the benefits of no-till are compared with minimum tillage or conventional tillage?
I mean, there's various stats bandied around about the sustainability of farming at the moment, and people, there's some that have been in the papers recently saying, some of our soils have only got 60 harvests left, and in a way, just sustaining the soils, keeping them as they are, probably isn't enough. I think we need to regenerate, and the only way to do that is to put things back into the soil, which is why we're using cover crops. I'd really like to start integrating livestock back in if I could. Maybe get some sheep to graze the cover crops through the winter and then drill into them in the spring, so you're cycling that matter, building up the humus levels in the soil. That's what it really centres around, is the soil health. Mixed farming was a way of life, the patchwork of farming across the countryside up till 25 years ago. Whereas now, in an arable area like this, there's very few livestock, and we need to try and fill that void, and cover crops are the main way of doing it.
Let's divert briefly to the contracting side of your business. When did that start?
When we went away from cattle, that coincided with picking up a bit of land on a contract farming arrangement, and that's where it really started from. And over the years, we've sort of invested in machinery and always had the ability to have a little bit of spare capacity. So if someone did want something done, we could help them out, do a bit of work for 3 or 4 local farmers, on a sort of operation by operation basis.
What spring cropping do you do or have done in the past?
We're fairly new to spring cropping. We used to have the occasional field of spring barley if we had something that was like sugar beet that was late lifted. But as a rule, up until a year ago, we didn't have any spring cropping. A third of our farm is now spring cropped. Last year we had some spring wheat, spring barley, which was good, and some linseed, which was not so good. This year we are predominantly spring barley. We're going to try some oats as well.
Away from blackgrass, what are your key weed issues? Specifically, perhaps, in the light of no-till.
Currently, really just blackgrass. There are certain weeds that can be a problem with no-till. You tend to get an encroachment from the edge of fields, certain things with bromes and things like that, so we've got to keep an eye on that. We also, with the land we've got, we do get charlock and runch and hedge mustard on the heavier stuff. But we've actually found that by not cultivating, we're not seeing those weeds growing.
Let's talk about technology. How do you use technology on the farm to improve efficiency and yields?
Yeah, I do like a bit of technology. The standard approach on farms now, most farmers have got satellite positioning technology on their tractors, so we've got that, so our tractors can steer in a straight line and repeat that across the fields. But we've taken that a step further, so we've actually mapped all of our fields for soil type and then split the fields up into zones, so we're actually able to manage each zone separately. So we know the nutrient status of each zone, and we can then apply the right amount to each zone. So rather than sampling the whole field and having an average, we're actually targeting the inputs we're applying to the zones where they're needed most.
Do you have a preference for different cover crops for different soils?
Yeah, so anything can be a cover crop. I quite like radish. It's got quite a deep root and it grows quite quickly. Phacelia I quite like because it kind of complements the deep rooting of the radish, slightly shallower root, but it'll still get through any tough layers, and it's also a great crop to see on flower. So yeah, we like that, and we like vetch as well. I mean, there's loads of other ones, but that seems to be what we're using at the moment, and that's not to say we'll keep using them. We'll try other things.
What soil tests and testing are you carrying out? Are you, for example, looking at how biological activity is being enhanced?
I'm quite keen on quantifying what we're doing and seeing the changes as we go along. So we've done soil organic matter tests, done a cation exchange capacity, which basically is just the nutrient holding capacity of the soil. And we've also done some micronutrient levels as well, and then we can monitor that as we go along and see the changes. A lot of our land here at home, we're about 4.5-5% organic matter, which is nationally quite high anyway. But again, I was saying earlier, that's down to a history of muck and livestock. But on the other farm, we've got organic matters down to 1.5%. So it'll be really interesting to see how that changes and how quickly it changes.
How many harvests have to go past before you can make a definitive choice of whether you're doing the right thing?
Well, with the harvest we've just had, we had one field of wheat, which was after rape, and we conventionally drilled half of it, which involved a disc tine cultivator and then a disc drill. And the other half, we put a cover crop in and then drilled it with a cross slot. Drilled the same day, same seed rate, and when we came to harvest, there were our two best bits of wheat on the whole farm. The direct drill bit was ever so slightly higher yielding than the other one, but really, statistically, there was no difference. And the only other interesting point was the protein was higher on the direct drilled one. But it wasn't a proper trial, so you can't really draw a definitive conclusion from that. But to me, if we can maintain yields and reduce our reliance on inputs and at the same time improve soil health, then I think that's a win.
Is the no-till community quite close?
It is. Yeah, I've met a lot of really good, interesting people, learnt an awful lot and made a few friends. We all have different ideas about what's right and what's wrong. We have a lot of different discussions. Technology keeps us together. We're quite a close community on Twitter, and we have a few sort of WhatsApp groups and things that all the drill owners get together and discuss different things that we're doing. And then there's the global side of that drill as well. And they do a 2-yearly conference which goes around the world. And they came to this country in the summer last year, and I met some farmers from America and New Zealand and Australia and all over the place. And really interesting seeing the challenges they have compared to what we have.
What would you say to sceptics?
Come and have a look. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty open about what we're doing. You know, it's really interesting getting down and learning about your soils and seeing how they change and seeing the life that's there. And because I believe it's right and it feels right, you know, it's quite a nice experience sharing that with people.
Let's talk about conservation measures on the farm. What stewardship options are you carrying out now, and how has that changed from perhaps when you started with stewardship?
We've got just over 900 acres in HLS, or ELS and HLS. So together with the grazing marsh, we've got about 12-13% of the farm is actually in various conservation measures. So we've got a lot of buffer strips next to watercourses. We've got awful lot of hedges, so various field corners. We do quite a lot of birdseed mixes as well. We've got a little shoot here at home on the farm, so that works with that quite well. And we do some coppicing in woodland, got some floristically enhanced strips and some pollen and nectar strips as well, which take quite a bit of management, but see them in full bloom in the middle of summer is quite nice seeing that. So we're quite wildlife orientated and always have been. Both families that farm here, the Lords and the Hunts, they've always liked their wildlife, and we've always tried to do what we can. But obviously it does cost money to manage and create habitat. You know,
what would happen if financial support was removed for you to be able to carry out that work?
Well, reluctantly, we wouldn't be able to do it. You know, we'd do what we could, but it would be a lot less. These pollen and nectar mixes, they're not cheap to establish, and you've got to keep mowing them. They take quite a lot of time, and although they are a small area, the amount of money and time that you put into maintaining them is proportionately greater than it would be for an arable crop. It would be a great shame. If we lost the environmental support, it would really harm wildlife in this country.
There isn't a farm around now that doesn't have some sort of diversification going on.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here?
Well, you probably saw as you drove down the lane here, we've got 5 fairly big wind turbines. So it's a 10 megawatt wind farm here, which we actually lease the land to Green Corps, and they supply into, we've got a 33 kVA line going through the farm. We've got some fishing lakes, standard sort of stuff, building lets, we've got a little caravan club site.
You are heavily involved in the local agricultural show, tendering show.
Yep.
I'm interested in knowing what is involved in the running of the local ag show and what you think the future for local shows is.
Yeah, so our local show, we have it's a one-day show it's the second Saturday in July. Generally have between 20 and 25,000 people, so it's a fairly big show, quite well known locally. The club that runs it, the Tendering Hundred Farmers Club, they employ a full-time secretary and a part-time secretary, and everything else is entirely voluntary. So there's about 600 members, and there's a managing committee of about 20 people who sort of organise all the various parts of the show, and then all the local farmers descend on the site 10 days before and put it all together. We try and make it as interactive as we can. We have a different theme every year. This year it's actually going to be You Are What You Eat. So we're trying to make the link between crop health and human health. Although it costs an awful lot to run the show, we look to make a very small profit. It's sustainable at the moment. I just hope it stays that way. It's an important part of our local community, that's for sure. It's something we're very lucky to have. There's a lot of people up and down the country that I speak to that don't have such a thing in their local area, and consequently actually don't know that many farmers, you know, other than their real local vicinity.
How could a new British agricultural policy help your business in the light of Brexit and the negotiation? If there was a message that you'd like to give the DEFRA team, what would it be?
I think there's 2 key things there. One is surrounding trade, and the other one is surrounding financial support. As much as possible, we need free trade. If we start getting tariffs on our wheat, then we're not going to be able to compete. To produce a tonne of wheat, you're looking at £120 a tonne cost of production, if you're fairly good at it. And the current price is 130 maybe, propped up by currency. So actually it would be near 115 if currency was where it normally is. So we'd be producing under the costs of production, and that's obviously not sustainable. You stick a tariff on there as well, farmers are going to look to do something else, and there really isn't. If you can't grow wheat profitably, then everything is linked to wheat. Financial support, following Brexit, I think it's got a link to providing a public good, environmental services, which we need to be paid for.
And what would your vision for farming be for the next generation?
I think the route we're going down on this farm would be my kind of blueprint for it. Farming over the last 60 years has been really influenced by policy, and people are really quick to blame farmers for what's happened to wildlife. Actually, when you look at it, what farmers have done is just a direct response to the agricultural policy of the government That's changing now. We've seen it the last 10, 15 years with the advent of these environmental schemes. If that can be encouraged and moved on, I think the countryside as a whole is going to be a healthier place environmentally and hopefully a more sustainable place for food production.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. It's been fascinating to talk
very
to
welcome.
you. And wish you all the very best for 2017.
Thank you very much, Ben.
This programme was presented and edited by Ben Eagle and mastered by Tom Bland for thinkingcountry.com.